Appreciate Richard Carr, their sponsorship of our segments on Baylor. Darrell Luce was he was the captain of that 1974 Southwest Conference team that beat Texas. That was one of the famous wins, but there were other wins along that way. They play Baylor in Texas tomorrow. Tonight, there's some new members of the Baylor Athletics Hall of Fame, and an attorney, Darrell Luce, now joins us now on Sikkim 365 Radio and 365 Sports. What was it like that week before 1974, that game against Texas, Darrell? And thank you very much for being a part of the show.
Thank you for inviting me. You know, that's been 50 years ago, so I'm not sure how much I remember about the week before, except that we were doing pretty good. We'd beaten Arkansas. We lost to A&M. I don't remember if it was before or after that. It was probably before that. But considering we lost all of our conference games the year before, we were doing pretty good.
Did Texas have an air about them? Were they not afraid of you guys going into that game?
Well, I don't think they were afraid of us. If I remember correctly, Baylor had lost 17 consecutive times to Texas then. And if I remember right, I was 22, so I was 5 years old the last time Baylor had beaten Texas. So I don't think they were afraid of us, no.
What do you think about this team this year? And they're off to this nice start with Coach Aranda after last year was so unique and weird with COVID and no spring drills. Your thoughts about what you've seen so far?
I think they look pretty good. This is probably a little bit presumptuous of me to say this, but I've never been one to think that you can actually tell all that much from practice what you have, especially in the quarterback position, because, you know, these days, nobody's going to let their quarterbacks get hit in practice. They know it's not live. It's just different. That's how guys like Tom Brady slip to the sixth round. You don't know what's going to happen until the bullets start flying. And I'm not sure that the coaches knew exactly what they had in Gary Bohannon. To me, he's looked a lot better throwing the ball than I expected. And I think they figured that out. They're starting to go to his strength some. So, but I think they look pretty good overall and probably should get better.
Do you have is Texas for you as an alum? Is this the week you maybe feel a little bit more nostalgic, or is there a certain team that would make you feel that much more nostalgic?
Excuse me. You know, the Texas game was a huge game for us 50 years ago. When I was in high school, recruiting was quite a bit different. You didn't have summer camps. You didn't have people signing up when they were juniors. You had unlimited visits, unlimited, you know, I went out to breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 2 months in December, January, and February leading up to recruiting. And during my senior year, Texas, you know, offered me a scholarship, and I was all in. That's where I was going. I visited 5 times, and there were also unlimited visits back then. Being from a small town, I just wasn't quite ready for a campus at that time with 35,000 students. They hadn't figured out any mass transit. You had to park about 3 miles from the dorm, and the crush of humanity. And that just didn't sit well with me, and I ended up coming to Baylor instead. But, you know, Texas was in the middle of, or starting the run of, winning 7 straight conference championships at that time, leading up to 74. So if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And I did not think they were arrogant. I thought Darrell Royal was a very humble man and great coach, considering his accomplishments. But if you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. So it meant a lot to play them.
You know, you look at this game now, and you've seen over the years from the Southwest Conference where you played, and then there was the Big 12 in 1996, and then there's Nebraska and Colorado. They leave. The Missouri and A&M, they leave. And now you have Texas and Oklahoma, and they leave. Do you feel like sometimes the Big 12, despite maybe being reactive rather than proactive, although they're trying to be proactive now with the expansion, has 9 lives?
You know, if I knew any of that, I could get myself a new suit and a briefcase and call myself a consultant and make a lot of money. But you know, I really liked the way the Southwest Conference was. I understand the economics that colleges feel like they have to get all the money they can, and it sure sounds to me like the TV networks and contracts are controlling the agenda. And I hate to see that, but I guess I understand it. I sure hate to see all the old rivalries go away.
What do you think now about how linebackers are used compared to when you played? And I know it's been 50 years and it's been a long time and things change, even changed when you played compared to 10 or 20 years prior to you. You have the jack position, the star position, the hybrid positions at linebacker and what these guys can do. Your thoughts about Terrell Bernard or Jalen Petrie or whoever else?
I really like the current style of linebacking. I think I would have been a much more effective player playing like that, even though I was a big guy for my size back then. I mean, I weighed 227 pounds my senior year, and one defensive lineman weighed that, and we were the two heaviest guys on the team. But even so, I wasn't a pusher and a shover. I was 6'3", so that wasn't that much weight spread over my height. I wasn't a great guy to stand in hand fight with someone. I was better to run and get to the point of attack. So I think I would have excelled at that and liked it a whole lot better. As far as the guys you're talking about, I don't watch a whole lot of film, but sometimes while I'm supposed to be working and they post things on Signal 365, I'll look at some of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching Terrell Bard in high school, and I picked him out as a player before he ever got here. We were taught some things back then that I think were really kind of counterproductive being a good player. Put a hat on them. How many times have you heard that?
Mm-hmm.
We were taught to lower your head, butt like a goat. And, and a lot of times a really good running back would just bounce off of you when you did that. Instead of getting your head to one side or the other, get your arms around them and keep your feet moving and drive them backwards. And I remember Terrell Bernard doing that in high school. Just run through the guys, pick them off the ground, and run them back. And he's done a real good job of that here, except when he's been hurt. He's had a little bit of an injury bug. Petrie, I'll have to say, if he's listening, I'll apologize to him. When I've watched them trying to play him as a freshman in Matt Rule's first year, he looked like a duck out of water. I understand I think I read he had a serious knee injury in high school. So, maybe he was trying to move up a level and still wasn't all back. But he's playing great now. I mean, he's just a playmaker. He puts himself in the right position and does his work early and makes a lot of great plays.
How much did playing football or being in any kind of competition in athletics prepare you for what you do for a living?
Well, I don't think I'm intimidated by anything that happens. I remember in law school, the professors would try to be mean and come pick up your notes and yell at you and try to make you feel down and get you off your game. I played at Baylor. I'd run through be introduced through the goalpost at Memorial Stadium in a playoff game against Pittsburgh Steelers. If some old man wants to get mad and yell at me and try to make me feel bad, that's not going to bother me as a lawyer.
Yeah, because you have to face some pretty large corporations, right? I've seen your resume. I mean, you got some pretty big bangers right there that you were going up against.
Well, I've had a really unique career, I think. I went to law school in the off season while I was playing professional football, and it took me 5 years that way. Then I graduated, and I was actually supposed to go back for my 7th year with the Detroit Lions, but to put it quite frankly, I valued my services a lot more than they did, and I decided it was time to get out while I could still walk, and I had a career I thought I could make more money at than I did in the NFL, and I was right.
Yeah, you were Colts, Vikings, Lions, again, captain of the 1974 Baylor Southwest Conference Championship team. Somebody just put up on the chat room, I bet Darryl has a lot of great Southwest Conference stories. Get that man a beer and let him tell you all the crazy things that used to be. Good times.
Well, I don't know if it was as crazy when I was there. Some of them happened, but one of the things that happened to us, we went to Arkansas, and I think this was in '74, and it was early in the season. Nobody really knew how big a game it was going to be, but we had we'd had a pretty good start. We'd played OU, which ended up being number one, not down to the wire, but down to the middle of the fourth quarter before they finally scored a couple of times. And then we beat Missouri and we beat Oklahoma State, who had a really good team. Really good team. I think they were ranked about 8th at that time. Conference schedule was quite a different thing back. The non-conference schedule was quite a different thing back then. At Baylor, we played all the best teams you could play, I think mainly so that they get a payday. They needed the money. And well, we went up to Arkansas, and I don't think the players found out until we got home. There'd been a bomb scare. Somebody had called and said they were going to blow up the motel. But I guess the coaches thought they had it handled because they didn't tell us about it until after the fact. But we won a wild game there. Neil Jeffrey got knocked out with, I think, a shot to the head. So Mark Jackson had to come in, and they fumbled a couple times on fourth down on the goal line, and we pulled out a win. It didn't look like much at the time, but it ended up being decisive when we got to the end of the year. You know, A&M game was always a big game. Baylor and A&M have had a big rivalry going way back before me, back to when they had some a pretty tragic event over at the old stadium, the big fight. So everybody remembered that. You knew a lot of the people we went to high school with and played against in high school, since he had all the schools in Texas, you'd see him on the field.
Daryl, you mentioned that you wanted to get out while you could still walk. And you know the stories about former players, especially the veterans. They have been fighting tooth and nail, and they're starting to get some of the money back as far as retirement, royalties, whatever else. Is that something that you still get anything out of that? Is that massive, whatever that was, lawsuit against the NFL? Did that even affect you, even though you seemed to be healthy when you left the game?
There have been some increases in the retirement fund.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I got out, we were probably looking at, after 6 years of service, something no more than $1,200 a month, no cost of living at age 55. And some of those, they call the legacy program, has upped that somewhat, and it's better than it was. And, I waited till I was 65 to take any of it. So I get a little money out of it. I think the bigger dollars that you're talking about is if people have had traumatic brain injuries or spinal injuries where they're really disabled. I think there's a fund for that. But, like any funds like that, they're pretty jealous with them. So I don't really know that much about it. I haven't applied for it. It'd be kind of hard for me to say I'm mentally disabled while I'm still practicing law. Some people,
it's a hell of a commercial.
I did have a lawyer in Baltimore tell me that one time.
I don't know if that would fly with the bar.
No, I'm going to hire you tomorrow. Hey, in all seriousness, when you watch the way the game is officiated and played, and I mean, now I saw something the other day, and I think it was Fran Tarkenton with the Vikings and somebody, I don't know who it was. They got into a fight at the end of the play in the end. I mean, they're just wailing at each other. When you see now the way the game is officiated, and I know they're trying to keep the targeting and all that, the violence of the game, concussions, do you sometimes go, what are they doing to the game that I played?
Well, for one thing, I will say, I really think the way that we were taught to tackle was bad.
Mm-hmm.
We were taught to head across the bow and hit them with your head. Now, most of the time as a linebacker, now maybe not some of the guys now, but most of the time as a linebacker, the guy you're tackling is faster than you are. So if you lead him, he can cut back and leave you in the dust. On the other hand, if you just tried to run straight through him, catch your head up, and when he stopped you run into him, it would be a better tackle, in my opinion. But going all the way back to ninth grade, they would line us up 15 yards apart, run together. Most of these coaches are dead. This is so they can't refute what I'm saying. But lower your heads and butt your helmets together. Now, sometime during that phrase they started saying, see what you hit, have your eyes up. But they still wanted you to hit with the crown of your helmet. And now I agree with the targeting thing. I think the defensive players get a real bad rap. When you're going to tackle a receiver or a running back, and at the last second, how many times have you seen them lower their head forward?
Mm-hmm.
And the helmets get hit together, and the defensive player gets ejected. I mean, how many times have you seen that?
Oh, all the time.
I think it should be that nobody else is going to like this. I think it should be a more subjective rule by the official. If it was, intentionally launching trying to cause injury. You know, if two guys just happen to run together real hard and they're both doing the same thing, I don't think anybody should be penalized. Now, I think if, you know, I have seen it called a few times that as a defensive player, you never would see, like a peel black block on a punt return or a kickoff return where you just get absolutely annihilated. You know, it wasn't many years ago that wasn't a penalty. I like that one, but I just think they could. I think they could allow a little bit more of if it's truly a dangerous intentional play, as opposed to, you know, two guys they both lower their heads and just say, well, you know, that's kind of both sides. I guess I don't know. I'm not sure I can argue against something that's meant to keep people from breaking their necks and getting concussions, but it does seem to be kind of odd when all the commentators that watch games all the time for a living will give their opinion on it, and then it's exactly opposite of what the referees do.
Well, like a fullback's job is to be a battering ram. To ram his body, head, whatever, helmet into the oncoming linebacker, defensive tackle, a safety, whatever. And you don't see, but like I've seen like one or two times since they began targeting where an offensive player has been called for that. And when they do, you're like, I saw an Oklahoma fullback one time get that, and it happens.
The only time you see it is on kind of a crackback type situation.
Yeah.
You know, blind side, I'll call it, out in the open. When some of those hits are just as bad in the middle of the line, you're absolutely right. What are you supposed to do as a linebacker when a 5'10", 230-pound, this shows my age, Norm Bulash comes through there and hits you in the chin with the bottom of the top of his helmet? You know, if you don't get down there with it, you're gonna be hurt.
Hey, Daryl, great to have you. Thank you so much, man. Enjoy your weekend. We appreciate your time.
All right, thank you.
Daryl Luce, he was the captain of the 1974 Baylor team that beat Texas, scored more points against them, I think, than anyone did up until that point. Broke a near 2-decade drought of beating Texas, who he mentioned had won a bunch of Southwest Conference championships consecutively, and Baylor, of course, had struggled. That was Grant Tapp. That was that first. Hey, and there were a couple other wins, and they did play Michigan, or they played whoever, anywhere. Thanks for Daryl Luce and his time. Coming up next.
By the way, same draft class in the Baltimore Colts as Roosevelt Leaks.
From University of Texas, one of the great backs that sometimes doesn't get mentioned enough. It's like we say Ricky Williams, Cedric Benson. We say, obviously, even now, Bijan Robinson or the others that have come along. Roosevelt Leaks was before Earl Campbell at the same time, earlier than Earl Campbell.
I bet you it's because he was right before Earl.
Yeah, and Earl kind of like Chris Gibson, another guy from back in the day. When we come back, we're going to check in Ole Miss.